and welcome to Working with Wonder. You might be able to tell it's kind of in the summer. It's a little hot in here. Um, I've waited a while to do this video. I wanted to show you working with the Provisional Death Database, and I wanted 2021 deaths to be somewhat complete, but we'll also look at 2022. This is more, we're not going to do anything in Excel. It's more that I'm going to show you aspects of how the provisional death database works. So if we go under here, and it says multiple cause of death, but we're not going to do anything with the multiple cause of death stuff. It's messy enough dealing with just one cause of death. So here's the provisional multiple cause of death data, but again, we're only going to use one cause of death. So we'll go into data request, and we'll just say, okay, that all of that stuff is, etc. But so we have deaths occurring through June 25th, 2022, as of July 6th, 2022. So now you can see when the last update occurred. So this is July 2022. And I'm going to have this, let's just start with aggregating by year. And then I'm going to do, because I want to show you something, let's do UCD, that's the underlying cause of death. Remember, there's one and only one. And again, so this is so that we can stay away from the multiple cause of death, an ICD chapter. And let me go down here so you can see what the ICD chapters look like before we pull this data. Okay, so we go down here to the underlying cause of death, which is section number 6. So UCD, ICD codes, and here we get our chapters. A through B, certain infectious and parasitic diseases. C through D are the neoplasms, which is just cancer. D, diseases of the blood and blood-forming organs. And you have all these different chapters that you see. Okay, and then we have something down here, and we're going to see this when we just hit send. And I did lie. I said that we weren't going to do anything in Excel, and I do realize why we will probably do something in Excel, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to send it. So we'll do year and UCD-ICD chapter. Okay, so we got a few of these red messages. Totals are not available for these results due to suppression constraints. So remember suppression, and we can click on more information. You can do that on your own time. But suppression is when there's too few deaths. They don't want you to be identifying individuals. And usually for suppression constraints, it's fewer than 10 deaths for people like me and you who are not, academics where you're allowed to get at the microdata. Then we have rows with suppressed deaths are hidden. You can unhide them, and then you will know that there are suppressed deaths. We can do that. So let's show our suppressed rows. Okay. And we'll see what that looks like. So for 2018 through 2020, those are not provisional data. Those are completed data, and we'll see that. We have all of our lovely chapters. So we have the codes and then the description of the chapters, the number of the deaths, population, and we get accrued rate. Now you see this U00-U99 codes for special purposes are suppressed. And you're like, wait a second, U07.1 is COVID, but this is 2018. Well, the U codes are used for more than just COVID. It's used for all sorts of special purposes. There's vaping, vaping accident or something. Maybe the vaping thing blew up in the person's face. No, I have no idea. But I want to note something, and this is for 2018. You'll see this 999-999, and it says suppressed. Well, that's because this is 0 for 2018, or it should be 0. But notice it says unreliable. Unreliable is because there's no estimate for what the population is for that. Well, it should be 0, I should hope. And then we get to 2019, and then 2020. These are all complete. But when we get to 2021, because it hasn't been finalized, we get provisional next to it. But when we get down to 999, where's our 999? You'll see it's suppressed. And this is what I have been waiting for. I had been waiting for the July update because this code 999, and we'll see it for 2022, is one that has been really annoying me because there's very important causes of death in this 999 code. It says data not shown due to 6-month lag to account for delays in death certificate completion for certain causes of death. What are those certain causes of death? It's homicide, suicide, and accidental deaths. It's when you are trying to figure out the intent. And it's often stuff like drug overdoses. So they put an official censor on it and you get this 999 code. So the death certificate does get put into the system. You get it for the count of total deaths, and you know it's probably an external cause of death as opposed to a physiological. It's not cancer. It's not heart disease, probably. Now, it could resolve to, like, say, a heart attack instead of, so it could be someone dies of a heart attack and they're driving, and then there's a car crash. And then you discover in the autopsy later, the car crash didn't kill the person, the heart attack did, and then the car crashed. It does happen, by the way. The car crash didn't do anything to the dead person, in any case. So we can see this when we get to the 2022 data. And the reason, this is why I started out with the ICD chapter, because I'm going to show you when we aggregate this for other things. So when we get to, okay, so we see this external causes of morbidity and mortality. This is like 300,000. So this has accidental causes of death, suicide, and homicide are in there. Okay, and then this U00 to U99, this isn't suppressed anymore. This is 400,000. This is all the COVID deaths are in here. That's the U07.1 is COVID. There's also terrorism is in the U codes. Anyway, there's some other things in U codes. Don't assume it's all COVID, by the way. But I want you to look down here. 2022, this external causes of morbidity and mortality for 2022 is a very small number. Because, take a look at this 999, all of the external causes of death are in this 999 bucket. They're being censored for now. Only a few of the January 2022 deaths are in this bucket. Just for the first few days of January 2022, managed to make it in there. You have to know how these data are reported, okay? Because a lot of people who are pulling data from Wonder don't know all the details. They think they know how this works and how things interact when they aggregate or they do their slices, and forget things like this, because I'm going to show you what happens when you do different causes of death and you pull these numbers. So I go back to the request form. So instead of doing the ICD chapter, let's say I do leading causes of death. And I have it by year. Let's see if it's going to let me do that. Okay, you're not allowed to combine it with group by variables. I forgot about that. Okay, so let me do leading causes of death. I have to get rid of everything else. You have to, so when you do leading causes of death, you have to select everything you want. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to pick 2021. Now it will say provisional, but it will be pretty close to what you want. Now, to make it interesting, I'm going to pick an age group that is going to give me particular results that I want. So I'm going to pick the age group 25 to 34 years old, and I want the top 15 causes of death in 2021. Actually, let's start with pre-pandemic. So let's do 2019 first, then we'll do it year by year. Let's just do 2019 first, and then we'll see their top causes of death. Okay. So it's accidents is number one. And remember, drug overdoses are in accidents. Okay. But motor vehicle accidents are in there as well. Number two is suicide. then it's homicide, then it's cancer, then it's heart disease. So those are our top 5. So remember, accidents, then suicide, then homicide, then cancer, then heart disease. And cancer and heart disease are pretty close together for these. So I'm going to go back to my request form. That's 2019. So now let's do, okay, so we've got it there. So that was 2019. Let's do 2020. And that's a completed year, not provisional. Okay, first we have accidents, then we have suicide, then we have homicide, though homicide went up. If you look at the numbers, homicide went up by quite a bit. Then heart disease, then cancer. But remember, heart disease and cancer were very close in numbers. So those are the top 5. Then COVID actually comes after that. So the top 5 are basically the same top 5, but the rates change. And if you notice the rates, accidents went up by a lot. Okay, so there we go for 2020. Now let's look at 2021. We'll go back to request form. Okay, here we go. We have accidents, then suicide, then homicide. And the suicide and homicide are about similar numbers to 2020. Then COVID, so COVID has jumped up. Then heart disease, and then cancer. And you'll see heart disease has jumped up in rate. So that's something to think about. So these are some big numbers. Okay, so this is 2021. Now we're going to look at 2022. And you're going to see some funky results. And notice it says provisional and partial. Here we go. Where did accidents go? Accidents are down here, way below cancer, then heart disease, then COVID. Because accidents, and where's homicide and suicide? Because 999, where it's censored, is not a rankable cause of death. It's not going to show up on here, even though that's going to be huge. So if I go back here, we're not going to do rankable causes of death. We're going to keep it to the same group. So it's going to be 2022. It's going to be that same age group. But now let's do, instead of these leading causes of death, let's do the ICD chapter and let's see how many are that 999. That'll give us how many suicides, homicides, accidents are in there. Oh, look, we got 9,000 deaths that didn't show up on our rankable list. That's pretty substantive. So I've often seen, especially on Twitter, people doing analyses of like current deaths during 2022 without thinking about how Wonder actually works. Now, some people do know how it works and know about this censored number, and then they try to divvy it up, making assumptions about what percentage of these deaths are homicides, what percentage suicides, and what percentage accidents. Okay, but what often happens is they'll take a total number of deaths and then they subtract off the causes of deaths they know about and then attribute what's left over to, oh, these must be vaccine injuries, versus, no, I'm sorry, you're not counting all the drug ODs because you're undercounting them because, of course, they're censored. You know, you do need to know your data, okay? So, yes, it kind of is annoying that they censored the data for 6 months. That said, I used to have to wait for over a year to get the data for a prior year. Like, we used to not, the external to the CDC, who's not an academic, used to not be able to get mortality data like this as rapidly as we do now. So I'm actually pretty happy that I'm able to get this kind of data. Another thing, people like, oh, we have fewer, I should just do month and not year and month. Let me just do month and get rid of the second because that's just redundant. So let me just do it by month, and we'll keep the other ones the same. All ages, I need to make sure that everything else is the same, all dates, and send. Now this is a case where graphing probably helps. I don't like their built-in graphing stuff. So this is all ages, and then, you see the numbers go up and down and up and down. And you see how many deaths per month there are. Okay. And of course, you have some big numbers in 2020. And then 2021, it really goes nuts in the fall. And then you see 2022, and you're like, oh, it's really low. Well, that's because there's reporting lags. This is just life. This is why, and this is why you see it says provisional and partial. Well, I'm sorry, May is also provisional and partial. You don't have all the deaths from May or April or March. There takes time from various states. The way this gets into wonder is that the death certificates are usually filed on a county level. This usually gets aggregated at a state level, though sometimes it goes straight from the counties to the CDC. There is a process. This is true for any data. Death certificates are generated by humans. They have to get into some kind of system, and then it has to be reported to the CDC via some system. I have discovered that North Carolina has finally digitized. Thank goodness. So they don't have such a huge lag. They used to have a 6-month lag and it used to come in and all in one big lump to the CDC. So there's not a huge lag in reporting to the CDC anymore, but I would not assume that you get it all within 1 month. It takes time to get the data to, I'd wait a few months before, it's more than just June. I would wait for, I would be happy with the numbers. Okay, January looks good. I'm not sure about February. Even March, I'd be going like those numbers might come up. April, I would consider that partial. May, but when they say partial, they mean not all days are covered, because it says deaths occurring through June 25th, 2022. That's what they mean by partial. They don't mean 100% of deaths in that month were reported. It just means not all dates in June 25th are covered. That's all they mean by partial. Okay, so there's plenty of death certificates coming in for 2022. Not very many coming in for 2021, but that's why it's still provisional. It's provisional because they've not finalized it. They're not going to finalize the 2021 numbers until probably December 2022. That was me waiting a full year after that year was done to get that data. Now they're giving us provisional data. This provisional database used to not be available to the public. So that's just something to know if you're working with the provisional database. I don't work with the provisional database too much other than 2021. I've not been doing anything with the 2022 numbers just because I don't like dealing with numbers that are moving underneath me for free. Because I do make estimates for paid work. I've done paid work where I'm estimating, it's actuarial work, where I'm estimating ranges of where the deaths can land. This is the kind of thing actuaries do. We can estimate ranges of where deaths. We do what's called incurred but not reported reserves for deaths, or death benefits if it's insurance coverage, say like life insurance. So we will make estimates for that kind of thing, and we would use this kind of data to help inform our estimates. But the problem with using the CDC data, at a life insurer, I would use data where I would know when the death occurred and then when it was reported. I don't get that information from CDC Wonders, so I don't find out when the death certificate was entered into the system. All I know, and I could do it, month to month, just do particular data draws and then use that to help develop, but I would have to make certain assumptions that, the process was pretty stable. And that's a huge assumption too. If I went from the North Carolina system, being a paper system, which it used to be, and then it turns into a digital system, and then I was making my estimates Without taking that into consideration, then I would have estimates that were really, really off for a while until I realized there was a change in process. And some actuaries have gotten into trouble setting IBNR reserves without knowing there had been a change in process. Thank you, CDC. The wonder, it's not a wonder, it's not and on purpose, it's not user friendly in certain respects. Unfortunately, it is too user friendly in other respects, so people who think they know what they're doing are often playing with it, who are used to data, so people like me. And some of them may not look too deeply into the details of the data and get misled by what they're looking at. So I've seen that before. But it is actually pretty easy to do data draws, but misinterpret what comes out of it. I'm sorry, it's true. Anyway, have fun with the provisional database. Just be careful in interpreting what comes out of it. That's my recommendation. Enjoy.